I would like to start with apologies. First of all, myself. I just recovered from a flu, and thanks to my wife who tried to get me well, I'm standing here, but you will have to excuse my deficiencies if I have to cough or will not be able to deliver the speeches as they were planned. And since we have a flu in all of Austria right now, I have also to excuse our president, Dr. van der Bellen, who called me this morning saying that he's also down with flu and cannot speak. And thank you very much for Ministerrat Lange, who is coming here and will deliver at least a speech which will be read by Professor Lange. Dr. Meilat Pokorny, the Hausherr, the landlord, is also sick. So, yeah, I said I have to start with apologies. I'm sorry. Thank you very much, Klubobmann Oksonic, for being here to show how important this conference and this Wiener Vorlesung is for the city of Vienna. Ladies and gentlemen, honored guests, speakers, participants of the conference, dear friends, meine sehr geehrte Damen und Herren, liebe Freunde, liebe Gemeindemitglieder. Welcome to the opening of the conference, An End to Antisemitism, organized by the Vienna University, by the Tel Aviv University, the New York University, and the European Jewish Congress, together with the city of Vienna and Wiener Vorlesungen. Let us welcome this afternoon Bishop Michael Bünker, Chief Rabbis Aryeh Folger, Abraham Skorka, Paul Chaim Eisenberg, Imam Chalgumi, Father Hoffman, and all the dignitaries representing the different religious denominations. Let us also welcome the Ambassador of the State of Israel, Talia Lador-Frescher, Nuntius Zubrigen, Botschafter Weiss, and all ambassadors and excellences who came here this afternoon. Cher Monsieur Bernard-Henri Lévy, c'est vraiment un plaisir de vous accueillir à Vienne et d'avoir la chance d'entendre votre discours. Soyez le bienvenu. Dear President Moshe Kantor, dear Moshe, President Deutsch, Presidents of the Austrian Jewish Communities, Chairman Anatoly Sharansky, Katharina von Schnurbein, Andrew Baker, Karel Frappakane, Mrs. Ruta Vanagaite. A very warm welcome to all of you. Director Engel and President Zeilinger, magnificences and leading members of academia, Professor Davidowitz, Lange, Porat, Schiffmann, and members of our advisory board. Welcome, and thank you for hosting and organizing this conference. If I missed somebody, please excuse. Ja, Frau Staatssekretärin, grüß Gott und danke, dass Sie gekommen sind. Danke, Ossi. I'm sure I missed some of you, so please don't be angry. We did our best. It was a little bit difficult to know who is coming and who is not coming. So I'm really happy, Frau Staatssekretärin, dass Sie heute da bei uns sind. Manishtana Halayla Hazeh are the first words the youngest child asks the father on Seder night, which the Jews celebrate each year to commemorate the Exodus from Egypt. How is this night different from all the others? So we are organizing a conference on antisemitism, another one may say, in so many. More speeches, more promises. How can this conference be different from all the others? When I first met Professor Lange and Professor Davidowitz, we thought that this conference must provide solutions and strategies based on academic research. I learned from my president, Moshe Kantor, that academia owes a lot to change the world, especially when it comes to these type of humanistic issues. So European Jewish Congress, New York University, Tel Aviv University, and the University of Vienna decided to bring 150 researchers on anti-Semitism from all over the world to Vienna. These scholars, social scientists, psychologists, decision makers, and activists will work together for 4 days to develop effective measures, strategies to restrain, combat, and put an end to anti-Semitism. And after the conference, all the findings and suggestions will be put into a catalog of policies, a handbook to be distributed to governments, universities, NGOs, social societies, etc. With this approach, the conference, An End to Antisemitism, marks a paradigm shift in the fight against antisemitism. Cooperation between academics, politicians, and other decision makers is to date unique. Another example of cooperation is with the city of Vienna and its mayor, Dr. Michael Häupl, and his team, who for decades have been on the forefront of this fight. This is why I have the pleasure to welcome you all, not just to the opening of the conference, but at the same time to a Wiener Vorlesung, a Vienna lecture. When you organize such a huge event, you do not know if your goals will be achieved, if we will develop substantial tools and strategy to cut off all the heads of this hydra which anti-Semitism is. But when we planned this conference, we did not realize what a burning issue this will be in Vienna in February of 2018. Sometimes you have to be lucky to do the right thing at the right time and in the right place. Anti-Semitism has been a main subject in all Austrian media over the last couple of weeks. We, the organizers of this conference, are not here to point our fingers at the antisemites, but we undertake this conference to deliver means and measures to seriously get rid of this sickness which is called antisemitism. And when we heard yesterday the Polish Prime Minister Morawiecki, if I pronounce it correctly, say that the Jews were also perpetrators of the Shoah, I ask myself, what does he mean? Does he mean that the Jews who carried the dead Jews from the gas chambers to the crematorias were also perpetrators? I mean, how can somebody say this in the 21st century? The Jews were also perpetrators of the Shoah. It is something which is impossible to understand without even saying he is anti-Semite or not. This is something which should not be said, not even thought in 2018. So I thank all the sponsors, organizers, all those who have worked so hard for so many months to put this conference together. And I thank you all, ladies and gentlemen, for coming to this conference. Actually, now I was supposed to introduce Dr. Andreas Meilert-Pokorny. I will introduce instead Dr. Armin Lange, who will be kind enough to speak for himself and on behalf of all the conference organizers, but who will also read the message of Dr. Andreas Meilert-Pokorny. I would like to take the opportunity to thank Magister Löcker and his team, to thank everybody that this conference opens here in this wonderful room, and that you did all the support, not just physical but also financial, to help us get this organized done. After Professor Lange, you will hear Professor Dr. Heitz Engel, the rector of the Vienna University, and Her Excellency Talia Lador-Frescher, the ambassador of Israel to Austria, who will make their greeting remarks. Then you will have the pleasure to listen to Viennese soprano singer Ethel Merhaut, accompanied by the pianist and composer Bela Koreni. The themes of Ethel Merhaut's music I almost made it. The themes of Ethel Merhaut's music are the persecuted and expelled Viennese Jewish composers. Today she will present 3 songs by Fritz Spiel, Egon Neumann, and Hermann Leopoldi, who had to flee Vienna in 1938 and 1939. Herr Professor Lange, the floor is yours.
Thank you, Dr. Musikant. In absentia, dear President van der Bellen, dear Father Hoffmann, dear Dr. Cantor, and Bernard-Henri Lévy, dear Eminences, Excellencies, Rabbis and Imams, dear members of parliaments, councillors and secretaries, dear presidents of religious communities and academic organizations, dear members of our advisory board and sponsors, dear speakers and participants of our conference. Ladies and gentlemen, honored guests and friends, it is a pleasure for me to be here tonight and welcome you all to this Vienna lecture and to the opening of our conference, An End to Antisemitism. And that also on behalf of my co-organizers, Ariel Musikant, Dina Porat, Lawrence Schiffman, and Klaus Davidovich, as well as on behalf of the European Jewish Congress, New York University, Tel Aviv University, and the University of Vienna. As you have heard, I have multiple personalities tonight. So first I would like to read to you the greeting of City Councillor Dr. Andreas Meilert-Pokorny. Anti-Semitism is on the rise all over Europe, not only as the extremist margins of the political spectrum, but also in ruling parties. Nowadays, anti-Semitism comes in different shapes and from different communities. Here in Vienna, in Austria, where we are happy and proud to host this conference, historically anti-Semitism from right-wing parties is the main political concern, although we also acknowledge that different strains have developed. Far-right anti-Semitism that led to the Holocaust is a defining legacy of our history. It has taken Austria a painfully long time to face up to the responsibility and to deal with history and this difficult legacy. In the early 1990s, Chancellor Franz Vranitzky was one of the first in the Austrian parliament in Vienna to speak out and acknowledge Austria's role in the Holocaust. By accepting this legacy, we are obliged to ensure Jews can feel safe and free in our society, that Jewish life and culture can be openly expressed, and that the community is an integral part of the Austrian society. All this seems currently to be at stake through the recent political changes. Some political actors are openly playing with anti-Semitic stereotypes, while most turn a blind eye to the subject matter. As a result, it is necessary to increase the budgets for more and better security measures to protect Jewish institutions. Anti-Semitism is lurking among Europe's resurgent nativist political movements and wins elections. This worries me and most Austrians too. Political anti-Semitic campaigns and the resulting events must serve as a wake-up call. Acknowledging them is the first step, but more efforts are needed in education and more scrutiny in social media. The approach of the city of Vienna in dealing with the past has been very clear. We have been facing our past. The actions we have taken in the past few years and developments speak for themselves. We have returned seized art objects to the rightful owners and heirs. We have installed projects of remembrance and restored Jewish cemeteries. In addition, many commemoration and teaching projects have been initiated in the past few years. There can be no justification for anti-Semitism. That may be stating the obvious, but these days it seems that the obvious needs to be stated. Anti-Semitism is not only a Jewish problem, it is a problem for democracy. It is not only threatening Jews, it is threatening our democratic system. If democracy is to be protected, anti-Semitism needs to be exposed and combated more actively. If Bernard-Henri Lévy states in his recent book that Judaism is strong, I want to add, and so is democracy. I would like to welcome you most cordially and convey the best wishes and regards of Mayor Michael Heupel and the entire city government of Vienna. Recent events here in Austria leave little doubt that a conference dealing with combating anti-Semitism, almost 80 years after the 1938 pogroms, is sorely needed. It is a sad reality that in our history we do not lack examples for Jew hatred and persecution. Cicero, Tacitus, Tertullian, John Chrysostom, Augustine, Justinian, the expulsion of the Jews from Medina, the Crusades, the Granada massacre, Martin Luther, the Spanish Inquisition, the pogroms, Paul de la Garde, Wilhelm Marr, Adolf Stöcker, Henry Ford, and the Ku Klux Klan, Hajj Amin al-Husseini, Adolf Hitler, and the Shoah. These are just few names and events from only a few parts of the world. All of us hoped that at the latest, the unspeakable horrors of the Shoah would have forced the world to end anti-Semitism. Far from true, boycotting the state of Israel and denying its right to exist, attacking and killing Jews, slandering and denigrating them in their daily lives, became a sad part of present-day Austria, Europe, the Americas, the Near East, and other parts of the world. Anti-Semitism can again be found in songbooks of fraternities, as the recent example from Austria leaves no doubt. Even on university campuses, ineffable slander is a sad reality, and that excludes, I'm very sorry to say, my own university. Hate preachers from the Christian and Muslim worlds agitate against Jews. The list goes on and on. Jewish friends from all over Europe tell me that they are all set to leave. Finding the same prejudices against Jews, similar forms of slander, similar ways to denigrate and persecute Jews 2,000 years ago as much as today, realizing that more than 70 years after the Shoah, anti-Semitism is on the rise again, watching it spreading not all over Europe and the Arabic world, but all over the planet. Despair is unavoidable. Studying anti-Semitism and combating it seems like the famous fight against windmills, a lost cause. Despair about the unacceptable and seemingly inevitable does create, though, a particular type of unconditional requirement, a particular type of categorical imperative, an end to anti-Semitism. When we were preparing this conference, my co-organizers and I were often warned to choose another title for it. Many people found polite words to suggest that we might be overly optimistic, that at best anti-Semitism could be kept in range, that all of us would simply have to live with anti-Semitism as a human condition, that we would have to accept it as an anthropological constant. But yet, reading all the abstracts written by our conference participants and interacting with many of you up until today changed the meaning of the conference title, An End to Anti-Semitism, for me. A categorical imperative born out of despair and resignation became something different. The cultural and religious memories of the Western and Muslim worlds preserved and communicated anti-Semitic prejudices over centuries and millennia. Whenever someone needs to explain a personal, economic, political, religious, cultural, or historical crisis, these cultural and religious memories provide individuals as well as whole societies with ready explanations about the Jews that are to be blamed. These explanations create Jew hatred that in turn led and leads to some of the most horrendous acts in the history of the world. Recognizing this mechanism provides me with hope that perhaps not in this generation, but at least in generations to come, we can eliminate anti-Semitic prejudice out of the world's cultural and religious memories. If we can achieve a breakthrough in abating Jew hatred in the cultural and religious memories of our world, then we can, in the longue durée, end anti-Semitism. To achieve this goal and to restrain anti-Semitism as much as possible until that point in time, we meet this week here in Vienna. We want not only to study anti-Semitism in all its historical depth from as many different perspectives as possible, but wish to create a catalogue of policies that will guide decision makers in their fight to end anti-Semitism. Before I give the floor to the rector of Vienna University as the host institution of our conference, my co-organizers and I would like to say thank you. Thank you to Dr. Moshe Kantor and the other generous sponsors of our conference. Thank you to Dr. Ariel Musikant, whose initial idea this conference was, who raised much of the funds for it and whose fingerprints you will see in this conference as much as that of any other conference organizer. Thank you to Magister Löcker and the city of Vienna for organizing the opening of this conference jointly with us as a Vienna lecture. Thank you for our conference staff, Kerstin Meyerhofer, Jael Müller, Maria Hartmann, Marie-Pauline Wiebe, and many others, as well as our PR team. Thank you to our advisory board, in particular Mark Weitzman, who also coordinates our catalogue of policies. Thank you to the field chairs, speakers, and participants of this conference. Thank you to our sponsors. Thank you to our spouses and children who had to miss. Thank you. Thank you to our spouses and children who had to miss their loved ones for far too many hours. And last but not least, thank you to the speakers of this evening, Dr. Moshe Kantor, in absentia President van der Bellen, His Holiness Pope Francis, Father Hoffman will read his text, and Bernard-Henri Lévy. Merci beaucoup.
Ladies and gentlemen, I want to welcome you on behalf of the University of Vienna, one of the main organizers of this conference. I also want to start with thanks. First, I want to thank again Dr. Moshe Kantor, the President of the European Jewish Congress, for major sponsorship of this conference, and to Professor Armin Lange, who obviously could not thank himself, for organizing this conference together with his colleagues and staff. Austria, given its recent history, has a special responsibility to fight anti-Semitism. And this is especially true also for the University of Vienna. In the beginning of the 20th century, the University of Vienna was a hotbed of anti-Semitism. This culminated in the murder of Professor Moritz Schlick on the main staircase of the University of Vienna in the 30s. But anti-Semitism existed a long time before at the university, at the end of the 19th century. An example is a famous rector of the University of Vienna, Eduard Süß, a famous geologist who was instrumental in building the so-called Hochquellwasserleitung, which brings the water from the mountains to the city of Vienna. He was also a politician. He was Jewish, and as far as I know, due to some anti-Semitic slurs against him, he resigned as rector of the University of Vienna. This was end of the 19th century. In the end of the 1920s, then Rector Gleisbach tried, at that time unsuccessfully, to enact a regulation which would discriminate against Jewish students. Then, in the end of the 30s, a symbolic pogrom was organized where memorials and statues of important scientists of the University of Vienna in the main Arkadenhof, in the main building of the university, for example, statues of famous professors of the university like Sonnenfels, Zuckerkandel, Kaposi, Goldschmidt, were disfigured, smeared, and partly knocked over. Nazi rector Knoll, the first Nazi rector of the University of Vienna, ordered an investigation which ended in the removal of all these 15 memorials. In 1938, all Jewish students from the university were expelled, and hundreds of scientists had to leave the university. Many of them had to leave the country, and many of them also died in concentration camps. Anti-Semitism is a pluralistic phenomenon with many faces and expressions. It can therefore only be fought effectively when a broad interdisciplinary range of specialists works together to study anti-Semitism and, based on these teamworks, makes recommendations how to fight it effectively. And you will see in the conference program that scientists from many disciplines, many faculties of the University of Vienna contribute to this conference. The conference deals with a very important topic for the University of Vienna. We thought that anti-Semitism is a phenomenon which doesn't exist at the University of Vienna, at least, anymore, but we were badly wrong, as occurrences last year actually showed with ugly anti-Semitic postings on the webpage of a student organization of the Faculty of Law. Therefore, it's very appropriate, but not only for that reason, of course, to organize this conference together with our partners, Tel Aviv University, Yad Vashem, and New York University, and for this evening with Wiener Vorlesungen. I want to end with a quotation in German language by Sigmund Freud. Die Stimme des Intellekts ist leise, aber sie ruht nicht, ehe sie sich Gehör verschafft hat. Am Ende, nach unzähligen, oft wiederholten Abweisungen, findet sie es doch. Dies ist einer der wenigen Punkte, in denen man für die Menschheit optimistisch sein darf. Scientific conferences like this one play a major role in this context. I want to end with an excuse for the fact that I have to leave immediately after my speech, because my daughter is getting married tomorrow in London, and I have to get the London flight at 8 o'clock. Thank you very much, and I wish all good things for this conference.
Mazal tov to Professor Engel. Excellencies, distinguished guests, panelists, experts, ladies and gentlemen, shalom. I'm deeply honored to take part in such a unique conference on the fight against anti-Semitism taking place here in Vienna. I'm also honored to pay my small contribution to gender equality today on this stage. As in the next 4 days, many esteemed experts will discuss in full detail the phenomenon of anti-Semitism and the appropriate ways to fight it, I wish to focus my short remarks on the issue of anti-Zionism and anti-Israel agitation. On May 26, 2016, the International Holocaust Remembrance Alliance, that incorporates 27 countries, including Austria and Israel, has adopted in Bucharest a working definition on anti-Semitism. This resolution includes examples to illustrate anti-Semitism, including denying the Jewish people the right to self-determination by claiming that the sheer existence of the State of Israel is a racist endeavor, and by applying double standard by requiring Israel a behavior not expected or demanded from any other democratic country. Israeli diplomats are often confronted with these phenomena. While the first case, the denial of Israel's right to self-determination, it is possible, with some difficulties, but still possible, to build coalitions against it, it is extremely difficult to fight against the expectations regarding Israel's moral ground. The double standard and hypocrisy poses a huge challenge to Israel's diplomats as well as Israel's well-wishers. These manifestations may be found in universities, NGOs, media outlets, and political parties in many countries across Europe on the bilateral front, and most troublesome is its manifestation in the multilateral arena. Israel is the only long-term member of the United Nations that was never elected as a member of the UN Security Council. There are 7 well-known protracted conflicts worldwide, including, for example, Western Sahara, Northern Cyprus, or Georgia. Throughout the years in the UN, resolutions that dealt with Israeli-Palestinian conflict used the terminology occupied territories. All in all, this terminology appears 2,342 times in the context of Israel, while in all other 6 protracted conflicts combined, the wording occupied territories appears only 16 times. This brings us back to double standard and the fertile ground where anti-Semitism is growing. I wish to thank the many organizers for putting this serious and alarming issue in the spotlight, for bringing a wide array of speakers and experts, and for all of you for taking the time to focus on this ever-burning topic. Toda rabba.
Wie
Oops. This is also Vienna, Jewish componists who had to leave this country in 1938 and 39. Many thanks, Ethel and Bella. It is now my pleasure to introduce the next speakers, all of whom play a major role in the fight against anti-Semitism. Dr. Moshe Kantor. He is an international public figure, Jewish politician, peace activist, and philanthropist. He is the role model of a businessman who more than exceeds the social responsibility that success brings with it. To list his many honors and functions would be a long lecture of its own. Just a few examples. President of the European Jewish Congress, President of the European Council on Tolerance and Reconciliation, President of the International Luxembourg Forum on Preventing Nuclear Catastrophe, President of the World Holocaust Forum Foundation, and Chairman of the World Jewish Congress Policy Council, etc., etc., etc. Dr. Kantor is a major figure in advancing Jewish life, in the fight against antisemitism, in the concerted efforts to preserve the memory and legacy of the Shoah, and in the concern of the security and safety of Jews and Jewish communities. The Jerusalem Post described Dr. Moshe Kantor in 2016 as probably the most influential Jewish leader in Europe today. Examples of his engagement include his role in the establishment of the European Parliament's Working Group on Antisemitism and his initiatives for international Holocaust Remembrance Day ceremonies in the European Parliament. This conference, An End to Antisemitism, is particularly indebted to Dr. Kantor, as he was, when we approached him, its main and first sponsor. We will then hear a letter sent by Pope Francis. His Holiness Pope Francis is the 266th Pope of the Catholic Church and the first non-European to hold his office since the 8th century. He was born in Buenos Aires, Argentina, as Jorge Maria Bergoglio. Since 1969, he has served as Catholic priest. From 1973 through 1979, he was Argentina's provincial superior of the Society of Jesus. In 1998, he became Archbishop of Buenos Aires, and in 2001 was made cardinal by John Paul II. Pope Francis is a long-time friend of the Jewish people and is well known for his interfaith initiatives. Together with Rabbi Abraham Skorka, who I am happy to tell you is with us today, Pope Francis co-authored the book On Heaven and Earth. Pope Francis speaks out against antisemitism not only inside the Catholic Church, but everywhere in the world. An example for his remarkable statements are, because of our common roots, a true Christian cannot be anti-Semitic, or inside every Christian is a Jew, and anyone who does not recognize the Jewish people in the state of Israel and the right to exist is guilty of anti-Semitism. In 2015 statement, the Catholic Church emphasized again that God has never revoked his covenant with his people Israel. Please join me in welcoming the President of the European Jewish Congress, Dr. Moshe Kantor. The speech of President Dr. van der Bellen will be read again by Professor Lange and by Father Norbert Hoffmann, the Secretary of the Pontifical Commission for Religious Relations with the Jews. I'm sorry. and a close, close friend of us whenever we come to the Vatican, who will read the written greetings of His Holiness Pope Francis. Moshe, you have the floor, and excuse my bad conditions tonight.
Is not so much appreciated thing to speak out after so beautiful singing of this beautiful lady, especially to speak about anti-Semitism. But we have to do this business because we have no other alternative. Dear Dr. Musikant, the real initiator of this conference, all distinguished guests, my personal hero, Dr. Sharansky, members of academia, ladies and gentlemen, dear friends. Little more than a century ago, a man was elected as a mayor of Vienna. His name was Karl Lueger, even though the emperor refused to confirm him due to his aggressive anti-Semitism. He came to power by using prejudice. He spread false claims against Jews and made anti-Semitism politically acceptable. Today I had a flight from Geneva. Several minutes before landing, I saw a famous town, Linz. Forever we will remember a modest artist whose art brought to the world 60 million casualties and which started a bit less than a century ago with ideological anti-Semitism. Today we see the different path. Only last year, in this very venue, a cross-party monitoring committee against anti-Semitism was introduced by the mayor. With this conference, we have taken on a very ambitious objective to plant the seeds that will end anti-Semitism. But we Jews say the seeds of salvation should be put in the soil only by ourselves. We invite to this process all Europeans. Talking about anti-Semitism is not enough. We must be determined in order to find pragmatic solutions to this problem. We need, first of all, to recognize the full extent of this issue today. Radical forces, both on the right and on the left wing, are gaining strength. In some countries, nationalists are already in power. A far-right party now sits in the German parliament. In Hungary, Jobbik is likely to be the second biggest party in coming elections. And here in Austria, FPÖ recently joined the government coalition. The European Jewish Congress and its Austrian affiliate, IKG, have been public in opposing this political situation in Austria. We are still skeptical about the motives of the FPÖ and their links to Nazi ideology and anti-Semitism. We welcome the recent decision by FPÖ to create a commission of historians to investigate its history in an attempt to distance itself from anti-Semitism and racism. We hope that this commission will remain independent and the results will be made public. We have an obligation not to give anti-Semitism any space in public sphere. All around Europe, the demons of xenophobia and anti-Semitism are on rise. In 2017, the number of anti-Semitic incidents escalated in the UK, France, Germany, and Sweden. Last April in Paris, a 66-year-old Jewish woman, Sarah Halimi, was thrown to her death from her own balcony because she was Jewish. Nevertheless, a French court recently refused to recognize anti-Semitic motive of this case, and this is willful blindness. Less than a month ago, synagogues in Malmö and Göteborg were firebombed because of the absurd belief that European Jews are to be blamed for a diplomatic statement from a non-Jew thousands of miles away telling the self-evident truth that Jerusalem is the capital of Israel. These attacks do not take place in a political vacuum. People marching in the streets of European capitals shouting death to Jews has led to the death of Jews, and it will do so in the future, again, if Europe doesn't react. Because of the constant threat, synagogues and Jewish community centers in many European countries are under 24-hour police and military protection. The truth is that we have moved on to rely more and more on hard power. This is, of course, necessary, but it is a shameful fact. The rise of anti-Semitism is one of the main security challenges of our time. Because it is an attack on the most reliable and law-abiding active element of the society chain. The fight against anti-Semitism is an indicator of the ability of democratic states to protect their citizens against the main security challenges of our time. Jews constitute less than 1% of the European population. We have been and still are an integral part of Europe's societies. But we should never have to justify the right of Jews to be part of Europe. Jewish life in Europe cannot be poisoned by the pessimistic dilemma to stay and live with challenges of anti-Semitism or to find safer place elsewhere. The only way to oppose hostile ideologies of Islamism, far right and far left, and all other forms of extremism is to develop a new ideology, which we call the secure tolerance concept. We must move towards an understanding of tolerance, which is conscious of the new challenges that society faces. We need to find ways of making tolerance more sustainable in face of Islamism, the rise of political extremism, the increasing pressure of immigration, and persistent social, cultural, and economic inequalities. In the German-speaking countries, the concept of defensive, so-called fortified democracy is well known. But any powerful fort in the world is destined to be destroyed. It is only the matter of time. Constructions to survive and win should be an organic part of the active front line. This is a vision of democracy that is able to defend itself through strong institutions that demand respect for fundamental rights. Secure tolerance is a paradigm and ideology of the 21st century. It is about limits, dimensions, and parameters of relations inside European society. You, politicians and academics, are obliged to make a huge contribution to its development for the benefit of future generations of all Europeans, not only Jews. Therefore, I am pleased to announce a startup of the European Council on Tolerance and Reconciliation to create an institution which will bring together a panel of international experts, including top historians and philosophers. They will work towards elaborating general guidelines on this secure tolerance concept, which finally should lead to fundamental reform to legislation. Hard power alone cannot deliver long-term security. Only in combination with soft power, society will be able to trigger an irrevocable legal framework that will guarantee security not only for Jews, but also for society as a whole. We cannot wait for conflict to become so bloody that the price of civil peace becomes unmanageable. We have to move fast and not wait for the new catastrophe, which unfortunately is the best teacher of history. This academic conference is an extremely valuable opportunity. Through numerous studies and reports, we have gradually come closer to understanding the dynamics of anti-Semitism. One thing is very strange. Until now, there has been much less ambitions in elaborating practical solutions to fight this evil effectively on the ground. Therefore, academic analysis must be followed by vital synthesis, which is so wanted. It is very important to keep it in mind. A few words about Poland. As European Jewish Congress President and Deputy Chairman of Yad Vashem, I promised to help the historian truth about the participation of Polish citizens in Holocaust, both positively and negatively. I would like to end with the words of Shimon Peres. For me, dreaming is pragmatic. Thank you for your attention.
Meine sehr verehrten Damen und Herren, nachdem wir in Wien sind, darf ich vielleicht ein paar Worte auch in Deutsch verlieren. Ich freue mich sehr, dass ich hier in Wien sein kann bei dieser bedeutenden Konferenz, und ich habe eine frohe Nachricht: Der Papst ist nicht krank und ich auch nicht. Das heißt, das Grußwort des Papstes wird durchaus vorgelesen werden können, und er hat mich da Ende Januar selbst beauftragt, Sie recht herzlich zu grüßen. Und damit ich nicht die rote Karte vom Herrn Musikant bekomme, mache ich jetzt auf Englisch weiter. Also, der Papst schreibt: Dear friends, I'm grateful for the noble aim that brings you here to reflect together from varying points of view on the responsibility of states, institutions, and individuals in the struggle against anti-Semitism and crimes associated with anti-Semitic hatred. I would like to emphasize one word: responsibility. We are responsible when we are able to respond. It is not merely a question of analyzing the causes of violence and refuting their perverse reasoning, but of being actively prepared to respond to them. Thus, the enemy against which we fight is not only hatred in all its forms, but even more fundamentally, indifference. For it is indifference that paralyzes and impedes us from doing what is right, even when we know what it is right. I do not grow tired of repeating that indifference is a virus that is dangerously contagious in our time, a time when we are ever more connected with others, but are increasingly less attentive to others. And yet the global context should help us understand that none of us is an island and none will have a future of peace without one that is worthy for all. The book of Genesis helps us to understand that indifference is an insidious evil crouching at man's door. It is the subject of debate between the Creator and his Creator at the beginning of history, as soon as the Creator asked Cain, "Where is your brother?" But Cain, who has just killed his brother, does not reply to the question, does not explain where. On the contrary, he protests that he is autonomous. "Am I my brother's keeper?" His brother does not interest him. Here is the root of perversity, the root of death that produces desperation and silence. I recall the roar of the deafening silence I sensed 2 years ago in Auschwitz-Birkenau, a disturbing silence that leaves space only for tears, for prayer, and for the begging of forgiveness. Faced with the virus of indifference, the root of hatred, what vaccine can we administer? The book of Deuteronomy comes to our aid. After a long journey through the desert, Moses addressed a basic counsel to the chosen people. "Remember your whole journey." A quote from Deuteronomy chapter 8, verse 2. To the people longing for the promised future, wisdom was suggesting one looks back, turning one's glance to the steps already completed. And Moses did not simply say, "Think of the journey," but "Remember," or "bring alive." Do not let the past die. Remember, that is, return with your heart. Do not only form the memory in your mind, but in the depth of your soul, with your whole being. And do not form a memory only of what you like, but of your whole journey. We have recently celebrated the International Holocaust Remembrance Day on January the 27th. In order to recover our humanity, to recover our human understanding of reality, and to overcome so many deplorable forms of apathy towards our neighbor, we need this memory, this capacity to involve ourselves together in remembering. Memory is the key to accessing the future, and it is our responsibility to hand it on in a dignified way to young generations. In this regard, I would like to mention a document of the Commission for Religious Relations with the Jews, whose 20th anniversary of publication we celebrate this year. The title is eloquent. We Remember, a Reflection on the Shoah, published March 16th, 1998. It was St. John Paul II's fervent hope that it would enable memory to play its necessary part in the process of shaping a future in which the unspeakable iniquity of Shoah will never again be possible. The text speaks of this memory, which we Christians are called to safeguard together with our elder Jewish brothers. Begin of the quote. However, it is not only a question of recalling the past. The common future of Jews and Christians demands that we remember, for there is no future without memory. History itself is memoria futuri." End of quote. To build our history, which will either be together or will not be at all, we need a common memory, living and faithful, that should not remain imprisoned in resentment, but, though riven by the night of pain, should open up to the hope of a new dawn. The Church desires to extend her hand. She wishes to remember and to walk together with our Jewish brothers and sisters. On this journey, the Church, mindful of the patrimony she shares with the Jews and moved not by political reasons but by the gospel's spiritual love, decries hatred, persecutions, displays of antisemitism directed against Jews at any time and by anyone. Dear friends, may we help one another in turn to grow a culture of responsibility, of memory, and of closeness, and to establish an alliance against indifference, against every form of indifference. The potentialities of information will certainly be of assistance. Even more important will be those of formation. We need urgently to educate young generations to become actively involved in the struggle against hatred and discrimination, but also in the overcoming of conflicting positions in the past, and never to grow tired of seeking the other. Indeed, to prepare a truly human future, rejecting evil is not enough. We need to build the common good together. I thank you for your commitment in all of these matters. May the Lord of peace accompany you and bless every one of your good intentions. Thank you.
Ladies and gentlemen, it is now my pleasure and honor to read you the address of our President, Alexander van der Bellen. It is a pleasure for me to be here today, at least in word. At the occasion of the opening of this important conference, the theme of the conference is timely. Although the horrors of the industrial mass murder of the National Socialist Holocaust took place almost a lifetime ago, anti-Semitism continues to be an issue today. Hostility toward minorities is not a thing of the past, but still a frightening part of the present, likely to challenge us also in the future. We are all painfully aware of the devastating consequences of racial fanaticism in the 20th century. We all know that millions of Jews and members of other minorities were forcefully displaced and murdered in its name. Today, we are also aware of the extent of damage that the persecution of religious and ethnic minorities inflicted on society itself. This damage on our society, a society which had considered itself enlightened, modern and humanistic at the dawn of the last century, was enormous. When people are driven out from our midst and murdered, it changes the consciousness of an entire generation, and that of those to follow. After the end of the National Socialist reign of terror, perpetrators, but also those who had remained silent and inactive, who had not opposed this insanity, neither of them were the same as before 1938. Those 10,000s of people who were displaced and murdered, artists, intellectuals, writers, scientists, and all other parts of the Austrian Jewish society, left an enormous void. Our country has lost a wealth of creativity and knowledge, of spirit and culture, of brain power and intellectual capital. Ladies and gentlemen, the Nazis did not invent anti-Semitism. For centuries prior to the Holocaust, anti-Semitism had led to pillaging, persecution, and forced displacement in many parts of Europe. But it was only in the 20th century that the National Socialists perfected a perverse regime of degradation, organized persecution, and murder on an unprecedented scale. The National Socialists exploited the anti-Semitism present in wide circles of society for their political goals. A great European, the Hungarian novelist and winner of the Nobel Prize for Literature, Imre Kertész, said, quote, Remembering the Holocaust is necessary in order to prevent it from happening again. But since Auschwitz, nothing happened, which would make another Auschwitz impossible. Before Auschwitz, it was unimaginable. Now, it is not anymore. Nowadays, new forms of anti-Semitism are emerging. Criticism of Israel does not equate to anti-Semitism, but often that criticism provides a platform for anti-Semitic ideas or cliches. This new anti-Semitism is a phenomenon which is cropping up and slowly taking effect in our country. And so our joint responsibility is to remain vigilant. Ladies and gentlemen, the lesson to be drawn from the pogroms and the Holocaust is the unconditional recognition of human rights and human dignity. However, the great challenge ahead of us is, how do we convey these principles? How do we reach young people on these issues? Do schools fulfill their tasks? Or visits to memorial sites? What responsibility can be assumed by the media? What role does political discourse play? Ladies and gentlemen, we need to confront not only anti-Semitism, but all forms of racism and hostility towards minorities in an open and critical manner. Our society needs to be sensitized to any kind of hostility towards minorities and any form of racism. Human dignity and human rights must serve as the foundations of our actions and our society. They need to become anchored in the mindset of all people living here. It is in this spirit that I would like to thank the organizers of this conference and wish you all a stimulating exchange of thoughts. And to all of us, I wish for great momentum in order to come closer to our shared goal of a world free of racism, free of anti-Semitism, free of hostility directed at minorities. A world where the understanding that all human beings are born free and equal in dignity and rights is truly being upheld. Thank you.
Man spielt oft mit Gedanken wie mit einem bunten Schmetterling, dem lang man nachjagt, bis er endlich doch in unserem Netz sich fing, möcht gern ins Weite, fort von dem Heute, und auf leichten Flügeln ist er schon bald entflohen. Gedanken sind die Falter unseres Lebens, umgaukelt lockend uns, wenn wir allein. Man hauscht nach ihnen leider oft vergebens, und oft fängt man sich spielend lächelnd ein. Ideen sind die Irrlichter der Seele, sie schweben uns her voll Tändelei. Kaum glaubt man sie zu halten, schon sind sie vorbei. Sie lassen sich nicht fassen, denn Gedanken sind frei. Man träumt so oft von Liebe, wenn sie auch schon lang vorüber ist. Erinnerung wird dann von längst vergessenen Lippen wach geküsst. Wenn in Gedanken still wir versanken, zog durch unser Herz ein Leitmotiv, das da rief: Ich denk an dich und küss dich in Gedanken. Mein ganzes Sinnen hielt nur dir allein. Denn träumend kam ein kleines Herz ins Wanken. Und längst wohin Gedanken ich schon erdein. Ich denk an dich und fühle deine Nähe, und Liebesgluten flammen uns zwei. Ich weiß, es ist ein Traum nur, doch was ist dabei? Ich küss dich in Gedanken, denn Gedanken sind frei.
Who is an intellectual? Asked philosopher Martin Buber in the midst of the Second World War, a time abundant with moral heavy questions. Who is an intellectual and what is his task? Before hearing Buber's question, the answer of Buber to this question, I was charged by trying to mention shortly, don't worry, shortly, to the audience in this gorgeous, gorgeous place, the leitmotif, the thread that runs among the speakers and the parts of this evening. And there is such a leitmotif, and this is the tension between despair, that was mentioned this evening, despair, and hope and trust that there is a possibility to fight anti-Semitism and perhaps start seeing the very end of it. You have heard the speakers. You will shortly have the pleasure of hearing Bernard-Henri Lévy, and afterwards, an award will be given by Dr. Moshe Kantor, assisted in this endeavor by Mrs. Raya Kalenova, his right hand, and this award is also part of the struggle against anti-Semitism. Let me come back to Buber's question. His task, he answered, is to force society to face the truth, the full truth about itself, and to do so courageously, taking into account that he, the intellectual, might become unpopular. Why should the intellectual be almost always unpopular? Because society likes to be flattered and to be assured that it is going the right way in every respect. Moreover, society needs myths of continuity, of being united, of faith in its trusted leaders and in its declared values. Yet only the intellectual who follows his mission and does not flatter and does not confirm what is wrong may have an impact on society, because his truthful, courageous message is bound to be listened to. Having listened to Buber's answer, it is a pleasure and an honor for all of us gathered here to welcome a true intellectual, a philosopher, author and journalist of the highest niveau, Bernard-Henri Lévy. He studied and associated with the greatest French philosophers of our time, established his own original line of thought, one that opposes Marxism, contrary to the popular direction, published a long and impressive line of books and articles that had an impact worldwide, among which is What Are Intellectuals For? Right to the point we have raised here. And on top of it, Lévy was courageously involved in the main conflicts of our era. He called for external intervention during the ethnic cleansing in Bosnia in the 1990s. He went to dangerous battlefields in Afghanistan and Pakistan, urged by President Chirac to investigate the murder of the Jewish journalist Daniel Pearl in the 2000s, and he constantly raises his voice wherever and whenever needed. I forgot to say, I'm Professor Porat. I'm head of the Kantor Center in Tel Aviv University. We thank Dr. Kantor for establishing it, and I'm chief historian of Yad Vashem. Let me end this modest introduction by mentioning the title of his most recent book, The Genius of Judaism. This is the title of Bernard-Henri Lévy's most recent book. This title fits these great men, it fits our conference, it fits the Wiener Vorlesungen, and it is an inspiration to all gathered here. Monsieur Lévy, s'il vous plaît.
Thank you. Thank you very much, Professor Porat. Thank you for your kind words. Thank you, ladies and gentlemen, your eminences, my dear friends, Dr. Musicant, Dr. Kantor. Thank you for inviting me and giving me the great honor to conclude this great and prestigious day of reflection. It's a very special thing, first of all, to speak about anti-Semitism in Vienna. Vienna is, as you know, better than anyone, has been the very capital, the beating heart, the vibrant body of the best of European spirit, therefore of the best of Jewish culture. Vienna was the country of Joseph Roth and of so many others, and was really the fatherland of the best of Judaism and of Europe. Vienna has also been one of the capitals, alas, of the worst anti-Semitism. When anti-Semitism became an exterminating force, when anti-Semitism turned into a will of complete destruance, Vienna in 1938, before, during, and after the applauded Anschluss, was one of the key places of this unbelievable, unprecedented horror. Vienna was this. Whether it is pleasant to admit or not, most of the historians of Holocaust, most of the Austrian academics of today know that and admit that Vienna was also this place of sorrow, of horror, and of mourning under the Holocaust. And Vienna is also today one of the numerous places, another one is France, where the question of anti-Semitism is in the process of becoming again a burning issue. In France, my country, is a place where again, even in a way worse than in the 1930s, you can be killed inside the walls of the city because you are a Jew. Professor Cantor, Dr. Cantor said it. He quoted Madame Halimi, who was killed because she was a Jew. He could have quoted her non-relative but same name, Ilan Halimi, 13 years ago, a young, bright, brilliant, sharp Jewish boy, Jewish teenager, who was kidnapped, detained, tortured to death, and left dead because he was a Jew, Ilan Halimi. And I cannot prevent myself from having a thought for the victims of Hyper Cacher in 2015, who were also in my country, victims of this new killing anti-Semitism. But Vienna, in a way, I don't think I will fail to the laws of hospitality if I say that Austria also is one of the places in Europe where, in another way, the question of anti-Semitism comes again. To have inside the government of a European country, and not any, one of the most prestigious European countries where the heart of Europe again is beating, some representatives of a party that was founded in 1956 by, among others, a former SS general, is not neutral. To speak in the capital of a country where a few days ago the press, the Austrian press, discovered, unveiled the fact and commented very bravely the fact that among the student confederations of this country was one, the Germania Confederation, where some Nazi songs have been edited and sung, a confederation to which belongs a very prominent member of one of the ruling party, makes this conference being held in Vienna, again, a very topical and crucial conference. And for that also I am embarrassed but happy of the privilege of addressing you today on that. I would like to say a few words also on the title of this day, of this conference. An end to anti-Semitism, exclamation point. I don't know if I like, really, to be honest, Dr. Musikant. I'm not sure, I don't know if I like absolutely I like the exclamation point in the title. And maybe it is the best of this title. And the idea of putting an end to anti-Semitism, I have, again, a slight embarrassment with that. Anti-Semitism exists since, according to the Midrash, since 3,500 years. I'm not sure that we will put an end to that today. According to one Midrash also, anti-Semitism is a very special form of hatred which appeared in the history of the Jews at the very moment where they were born. And the Midrash says that anti-Semitism appeared when the nations forgot the last letter of the little mountain on which the revelation was done. When the nation forgot the final Yud, which is the name of God, Sinai became Sinar and became the name of a very special and terrible hate. And there might be in the sort of message which our fathers and ancestors bear on their shoulders and in their heart and in their brain since ages, something which probably generates, in a way, a form of hostility. And I think with many wise men of the Jewish tradition, that this has to be dealt with in a political way, but also in a metaphysical way. And my conviction is that against this plague of anti-Semitism, against this hate which is addressed to the Jews of flesh and bone, but also to the text which they continue to bear and to revere and to worship, this hatred has to be contained, has to be battled against, has to be resisted, but alas, I think it will not be erased or eradicated. By the way, I'm always a little suspicious in front of the idea that the evil, whatever is the form, and the anti-Semitism is probably the worst of the forms of the evil, one which created and generated the worst crime in human history. But the idea of eradicating the evil, the idea of purifying the world from the evil, I think that for reasons in which I will not enter here, it might be a difficult and maybe a risky idea. So let's be content with resisting anti-Semitism, containing anti-Semitism, fighting it foot to foot, merciless, but certainly not eradicating it, neither today nor tomorrow, and probably not in our lifetime. And it's important to say that because sometimes when you aim too much, you fail to achieve what is at your hand. We can achieve the goal of weakening anti-Semitism, of being stronger than the anti-Semites. We can reach the goal of marginalizing the anti-Semites, but certainly not to make them disappear. And to be honest, the fact that they disappear or not seems to me rather indifferent as long as they are contained to the point that they cannot harm any longer or not harm as they do today. So the question is how to contain, how to win against the anti-Semitism, how to be stronger than the strongest forms of anti-Semitism. And my reply, Dr. Cantor, Dr. Musicant, you asked today, and I think you are right, you ask for concrete replies. You, as I understood, you would be happy if this day ended with a sort of program of resistance. You started to give some guidelines, and I would like to continue and to add a few remarks to what was said. So what can be achieved in front of this wave of anti-Semitism which is blowing, this wind of anti-Semitism blowing on France, on Austria, on Poland, on Hungary, on United States, and on all the rest of the world? I think we have there is three tasks: to name, to reply, and to counterattack. First of all, to name. You cannot fight an enemy. You cannot even face it if you don't know exactly who he is, how it works, how the brain of the enemy functions. If you don't do that, if you don't take the precaution, which is 1/3 of the road, to identify the enemy, you are at risk of fighting a ghost or to shoot on a shadow. So what is the real name of anti-Semitism today? What is the real face of anti-Semitism? It has a lot of faces, of course, but among this lot of faces, there are some of them who are more sly than others, who are more pernicious than others. You have some of the faces which are more sneaky than others. The racist anti-Semitism, the anti-Semitism who pretends that Dr. Cantor or myself or my personal hero too, Nathan Sharansky, or all of you, have a special gene, belong to a special race, have a special form of brain or head. This, of course, is disgusting. This, of course, did a lot of harm, but in a way, it has been discredited by the obviousness of the crimes which were committed under its name. We still have some racist anti-Semites. They have to be fought with determination, but it is probably not the core or the vanguard or the mass of the possible and growing army of anti-Semitism which we have in front of us. The old anti-Semitism which did so many harm, which is the Christian one, the anti-Semitism which said for ages, for centuries, that the Jews had to be hated because they committed once upon a time the crime of killing or participating to the killing of Jesus Christ. Of course it still exists. Of course you still have some ignorant spirits who believe in this story. But again, I think that there are fewer and fewer, for a reason I will develop in a few minutes. There are fewer and fewer, and it is certainly not the sword and the biggest threat we have in front of us. And again, for various reasons, the link between that and the consequence is more or less obvious. Today, if the anti-Semitism becomes, again, which is not exactly the case now, but we are close, if it becomes again a mass movement, like in the 30s, or like in the time of the Dreyfus affair, if it becomes again, another time, a mass movement engaging some huge crowds under its flags, it will be because it will articulate its hate after and under some new topics and some new sort of pretensions. To be efficient, anti-Semitism has to be convincing. To be efficient, to mobilize people, anti-Semitism has to give the feeling to feeble minds that in the process of hating the Jews, they reach another target which could be, at the end of the times, a noble target. So one of the tools for that is what is called, alas, the anti-Zionism. Anti-Zionism is the new name, one of the three new names of anti-Semitism, because it gives the feeling to those who endorse the anti-Zionism that they don't exactly hate the Jews, but that they hate a state which is supposed to be a bad, reactionary, oppressive, or fascist state. A lot of people in the world really believe that by being anti-Zionist, they are anti-Semite, but with good reasons. The second pillar of the new anti-Semitism, the second argument which gives a legitimacy to the anti-Semitism of today is, according to me, but I know according to numerous others, the denial of Holocaust. In the new portrait of the Jew, which is depicted by the anti-Semite of the 21st century, one of the biggest crimes of the Jews is to invent or to exaggerate or to falsify or to express their own martyrdom or the martyrdom of their families or ancestors. At the end of the day, an anti-Semite of today is always, in a way or in another, someone who flirts with flirtation, denial of Holocaust. It can be rough, it can be shameless, and it can be more sly. But it always ends with that. And the new anti-Semite is third pillar of the new speech, if we really want to give it the proper name and to recognize its proper face. The new anti-Semitism is built under the idea, the stupid, the disgusting, the sad idea of an imaginary competition of victims. An anti-Semite today is someone who, at the end of the day, believes that in the heart of a man, there is a very limited place for sorrow, a very limited place for pity, and if you feel sorrow or pity for one crime, there is nothing left for the others. And the grievance addressed at the end of the day, again, and in a form or in another, by most of the anti-Semites to those who are here and others, is by their obstination in reminding their deads, by their obstination, their stiff head in not forgetting the past. The grievance is to be guilty of overshadowing the other sufferings, the other martyrdoms of the history and of today. The new anti-Semitism, if we want to be serious, might be racist, might be socialist, anti-plutocratic, might be extreme right, extreme left, might be Catholic, Protestant, in some case, of course. There is remnants of all of that. But the core of the machinery, the engines which makes it potentially efficient and killing are these three topics: competition of victims, denial of Holocaust, and anti-Zionism. This, for me, is the stage. This is the landscape. This is the real picture of the face which we have in front of us and which we will have more and more if we don't identify them and if we don't reply and counterattack. Because number two, after naming, I told you that the program should be to reply. Even if anti-Semitism is as old as Judaism, even if anti-Semitism dates from the time where the final Yod of the Sinai was forgotten, there is way to reduce, there is way to convince, there is a gray area, at least, in the opinion, the world opinion, which is possibly tempted in hating the Jews. There is a way to reduce this gray area and to convince part of it. And the task should be, Dr. Cantor, my feeling, to reply point after point on these three arguments. And I address here all the academics who attend this conference. There is a pedagogical work to do. You know, there was a great historian called Jules Isaac, after the Second World War, who devoted the rest of his life to argue against the Christian anti-Semitism. And this work worked. In a way, it led to the Conference of Silisberg and to Nostra Aetate, of which I'm going to speak in 1 minute. So there should be today some Jules Isaac of the 21st century who should be able to reply point after point to these three arguments. Anti-Zionism. We have not enough academics, scholars, heroes, free speakers, saying on and on that far from being despised, hated, depicted as the face of the evil by the liberals, Israel should be praised, even according to the, and especially according to the standards of the liberal values. To be a Jew today, or just to be a Democrat, knowing that anti-Semitism is a plague, should consist in replying to the anti-Zionist that the Zionism is the name of an ideology who produced the best achieved or the least badly achieved ethnic society in the world of today. This goal of the liberals all over the world, which is to make possible some multi-ethnic societies matching with the world and the globalization of today, this is, they can will it or not, is embodied by Israel, which is a country where some Jews coming from Russia, coming from the Western or Eastern Europe, coming from the Arab countries, coming from Africa, did melt with each other and made possible overnight the dream of the Democrats of all the world, which is the motto of America, taken from the Latin poet Virgil, e pluribus unum. From pluribus, from a lot of identities, of ethnicities, how to make one political body. This is the most difficult question which is addressed to all the democracies and liberals in the world. We should say on and on that Israel modestly, with some failures, of course, with some defects, but not so badly achieved it. We should say that more broadly, the most difficult question of the political philosophy since Plato, at least since Jean-Jacques Rousseau, which is the question to how to build a democracy. And even before that, even since Jean Bodin, since Grotius, since all the inventors of the political philosophy, they say that the big question is how to go from an authoritarian society to a free society. And they know that it takes, they say, and they are right, that it takes some time, it takes some ways back, it takes some counter-revolutions. We know that in France. We made a revolution in 1789, but we had a huge counter-revolution. We had a terrible empire, and the real republic was pronounced nearly 1 century after. We should say on, and the academics should say, or indeed if they don't say it, they should give us, poor public intellectuals, the tools and the weapons to say it, that Israel is at the end of the day the only place in the world when this dream of making a general will in the shape of a democracy happened overnight. In 1948, overnight, people who came from countries that, for most of them, did not have the slightest idea of what is a democracy, frankly. The Jews who came from Russia, what did they know about democracy? The Jews coming from the Arab countries, from Iraq, what did they know about the democracy? The Jews who came from Nazi Germany, who fled, who escaped, the few who escaped, or from Austria, the very few, what did they know about democracy except an obscure nostalgia? But they made overnight a democracy. These are the sorts of arguments which the academics to whom you address your appeal today, to which the academics present here should reply foot by foot. The anti-Zionism is not only a crime, but it is a stupidity. It does not hold 1 minute, it does not stand 1 minute in front of the evidence. Another example, all the democracies in the world know that there is one situation which is what other philosophers called the state of exception, where the democratic values shiver and are at the edge of collapsing. And the biggest state of exception is a war. In front of a war, the democratic values, even well established, even well built, they may collapse. And if they don't collapse, they are put into parentheses. We saw that in my dear to my heart America after September 11. A few weeks after September 11, there were some laws which suspended some, for a little time, but some democratic principles. We saw that in my country during the war of Algeria. After a few months, democratic laws were suspended. Israel lives under state of exception, not since a few weeks, not since a few months, not even since a few years, but since the very act of its baptism. And the democratic rules stand firm and hold firm. Even in the bottom of the wars, I was there in some Arab villages of Israel, the rule of law was never suspended. So we have to reply to fight anti-Semitism is to reply point after point to anti-Zionism. The denial of Holocaust. Again, we have to reply, we have to take it, alas, seriously. I remember when this other plague of spirit appeared 35 or 40 years ago, maybe, in my country on a mass scale. I thought at this time that it had to be despised, that it will vanish as the doctrine of those who say that the earth is flat or that the sun does not shine at midday. Alas, it is not the case. The denial of Holocaust is growing and gaining some extension every day. So again, the academics and those to whom the academics will be kind enough to give weapons have to reply to that. And we have, for example, to be, we, not Jews, but those who believe that anti-Semitism is not only the enemy of Judaism, but the enemy of free society, we have to reply very precisely on one precise point: the specificity, the singularity of Holocaust. This is one of the keys. If you look really at the disgusting literature of the new anti-Semitism, this is one of the points. There are so many martyrdoms in history. There are so many massacres even today. What is so special about Holocaust? And why should something special be, by the way? It could not be. And I would be very happy if there was nothing special. But we have to reply on that very precisely. There is nothing special in the Holocaust in terms of figures, of course. There are some massacres who made much more dead than the Holocaust. There is nothing special in terms of technicity. It is often said that Holocaust reached a climax of specificity, of technicity. It's not so sure. The Gulag had a terrible technicity too. The country of Lenin plus electricity built some concentration camps which were technical enough too. I'm not sure that the Holocaust is the only massacre who was planified, who obeyed to a long-term planification, and which was thought from top to toes. Armenian genocide was also, we know that today. Probably the genocide in Rwanda was also. What the Holocaust has, the very singularity of Holocaust, what, alas, unfortunately belongs to Holocaust and which does not belong, thanks God, to any other massacre, is something else, which has to be stressed, which has to be identified, and which has to be shown again and again to those who preach this plague of the spirit, which is denial of Holocaust. What the Holocaust has special is the fact that it is the first and the only massacre in history that was sans reste, sans recours et sans trace. Sans reste, I mean without any remnant. Nothing had to be left without rest. Not rest sleeping, but nothing left, number one. This idea of killing people, from old men to children, and from the children to the already dead, to the books and so on, was never expressed in human history. Without any recourse, without any possibility of escape. In all the massacres and in all the genocide of history, there was a theoretical possibility, if you escaped the Turks in the Ottoman Empire at the time of Armenians, it was very difficult, nearly impossible, but at least theoretically you were safe. In Rwanda, it was nearly impossible, but if you could reach the neighbor Burundi, you were safe. Or the Central Africa. The killers of the Hutu power did not go to take you in Central Africa. The Holocaust is the only massacre whose perpetrators decided that the whole world had to be a trap and had to be a camp, a field of death. This is the uniqueness also of Holocaust. Without rest, with nothing left, without any place in which you could escape, and without trace. The Armenian genocide, which is the first genocide in history, and which is terrible, and of the memory of which we have the memory of the victims, we have to worship, of course, as a dear memory. But there was not this idea to erase the fact of the crime. And at the beginning of the 1920s, all the proofs were there. Before the following denial, all the proofs were there. The idea of erasing the traces of the massacre did not occur to the mind of the Cambodians. They did not give a shit about erasing or not the traces of what they were doing. The Ukrainian genocide, the Holodomor, perpetrated by Stalin, who was a genocide. Again, there was not the idea in the brain of Stalin and of his executioners to erase the crime in the very process in which he was committing it. For the Jews, this is again the third and the last singularity of the Holocaust. It is a crime whose program was in the same gesture to kill and to erase the killing. And this makes a huge difference. And this, alas, again, it's not a pride. It's a very dark and sad privilege, but this makes the Holocaust, alas, uncomparable to the other massacres. So, again, in front of the denial of Holocaust, which is one of the pillars of the new anti-Semitism, we have to define and to insist on this singularity. Competition of victims, this is probably one of the most pernicious arguments. The idea that in insisting too much about the memory of Holocaust, by doing some mahmal, some memorials for the Jewish victims, we can only overshadow the other victims. Again, I believe that we have to reply to that and to say again that it is not only disgusting, but it is false. I could prove, not the time today, but you know that. I could prove that the reverse is true. Each time since 1945, each time where there has been the smell or the fact of a new big massacre, the first to take notice of it, the first to ring the bell, the first to make the warning appeal were those Christians, atheists, and sometimes Jews who remember, and Muslims who remembered the Holocaust. In Sarajevo, 25 years ago, in Darfur, 10 years ago, in Rwanda, 25 years ago, and so on. The best way to be aware, to feel the bad smell of the beast coming again was to be equipped with this terrible radar, which was the memory of the fact that the worst was possible, had happened, and could happen again. Therefore, far from being a way to inhibit, to prevent the perception of other massacres, we have to say on and on to those who are in the gray area, maybe tempted to listen to the bad song of the anti-Semite, that it is the opposite. It disinhibits the captation and attention to the worst. The fact of being aware of the Holocaust, the fact of worshipping the sacred or the saint memory of its victim gives a sort of alarm in front of all the other possible circumstances of same sort. So we have to reply point by point. And last, we have to name, we have to reply, and last, I do believe that if we want to be efficient, we have to counter-attack. To counter-attack means what? It means that if really the anti-Semites declared a war, because it is the case, they declared a war to the Jews, and a war to the open and liberalized society in general, and probably to the very possibility of any society also. The Germans and the Austrians know that. What was at stake during the National Socialist regime was the possibility of a collapse, of a suicide of the German society as itself. If really this war is at stake, we have to win this war. To win a war means to be stronger than the enemy. How to be stronger? Number one, I'm sorry to say that, Israel. I really believe that the fact of the existence of Israel, the fact that somewhere in the world exists a country which has the name and the shape and the spirit of Israel, gives a lot of strength in this battle. Israel may go into mistakes. Israel can have a very bad government. This is not the question. The question is that, as my friend Claude Lanzmann said once after his film Shoah, Holocaust, he said that the very possibility of the reappropriation by the Jews of this terrible, horrible thing which is force, to reappropriate it in a certain way with some ethic norms, with some ethical principles, changes a lot in the relationship of force between the Jews and those who want to harm, humiliate, or kill them. And every Jew in the world, even those who don't feel so close to Israel, even those Jews, they exist, and why not, who don't like Israel, even those who believe that the building of Israel was a metaphysical mistake, even those, they draw from the existence of Israel a dimension of a source of strength which arm them, not stupid arms, but which arm them spiritually, mentally, ideologically against the brutal strengths of the anti-Semite. This is one very important thing. Another very important thing to win this war, to be stronger than the strongest anti-Semite, is to be precisely spiritually strong. You cannot win a war when you don't know who you are, when you don't have the pride of what you are, and when you leave yourself being depicted or cartoonized, reduced at a state of a cartoon by your enemy. And one very crucial turn in the last decades after the birth of Israel was the return of a reasonable number of Jews in Europe, in America, and in the rest of the world to what is the real strength of the Jews, what is the oldest strength of the Jews, which is not military, which is not money, which is not politics, which is study or relationship to the text. The fact that since the 70s in Europe, before that in Soviet Union, a growing number of Jews decided to break with this image of themselves reduced to a ghost, reduced to a shadow, or reduced to a cartoon which the anti-Semites produced. This gave to all of us, even if we are not part of this in this return, a very special and very difficult to beat, to battle against source of strength. The real strength of the Jews is in this old lesson of Maimonides, of Rashi, of the Maharal of Prague, of the Gaon of Vilna, of many others, which is this incredibly special relationship to the text. And when you have to wage a war, you have to be faithful to the country of which you are a citizen. You have to be faithful to the civilization of which you are part. But you have to be at least aware, and in a way proud, even in a modest way, of your very special relationship to spirit or intelligence. The real strength of the Jew with which we have to renew, and with which we do renew, is certainly that. Number 3, the memory. It seems to be, again, a question in Europe. I heard, as you did, Dr. Kantor, what is happening in Poland these last days. The battle on memory is open again in Poland. It is open again in Hungary. And it is open again here. I don't know what we have to say. You were very kind to, and you are right, to say that when someone claims that he is going to face its own memory, you have to give at first credit to him. Okay. But there is very precise ways to know if this will is sincere or not. There is very precise criteria. And my feeling, I'm going to leave Austria tomorrow, but I will come back and I will keep an ear, if you allow me, and an eye. What will be this commission? How will it be composed? Can a commission of historians be built by a party? Can it be built in another way than a fully independent and academic way? What will be the sort of publicity of this commission when it will be built? I suggest, if we want really to give flesh to the exclamation point of the title, I suggest to watch that very carefully. And if really there is a will of the Austria of today to repent, to remorse about the crimes committed by the Austrians, or at least crimes of which they were complicit with, there is very simple ways to say it. In Germany, for example, in 1999 or in 2000, after years and years of debate, there was a huge Machmal, a huge monument built in the center of Berlin. In France, there is a wall of names. Every single victim is written. These victims who have no grave, no name, no face, no archive anywhere, they have a name in this wall. In Austria, there is a Machmal. The Machmal wished by Simon Wiesenthal and built in 1995 or 6, which is a great Machmal, but not the brightest and the biggest and the most explicit Machmal which could be done by a government really concerned by its own memory. So you should suggest to the government of this country, at the end of the day, as far as I know through Raoul Hilberg, Austria was the country in Europe in which the biggest proportion of Jews did not come back from the extermination camps. 83% of the... there was, according to Hilberg, 50,000 did not come back, 83% of the total population. This is a lot. Why not, in the center of Vienna, as the Klarsfeld did in Paris, a wall, a simple, sober, modest, humble wall with these 50, 55 names. The names of the Austrian citizens who did not came back from the country of smoke and ashes because they were Jews. The names. This is the best of what a commission of historians can recommend and the best which can come out of a work of memory. A memory without real sorrow, real mourning, and real repentance does not exist. And the best way to express that is to grave it in the stone. And to grave it what? The names. These children, these ladies, these men who passed away without any single trace or archive. They could have it in the center of Austria if this government wishes it. To be stronger than the fiercest anti-Semites, we should recommend and we should hope, as in any war, we should recommend to reinforce the mechanism of the alliances. In a war, you have not only the bad guy and the good guy, you have some alliance. The Jews were victims in the times in which they were alone, single in the world, nobody to support them. They will prevail and they will resist if and when and because they will have some strong allies. They have already some strong allies. Especially, and this is a very new thing, this is one of the best achieved revolutions of the 20th century among the Christian churches. I quoted before the Silisberg Conference, little city in Switzerland, 1953 or 4, which prepared the encyclic Nostra Aetate of 1965. Silisberg Conference, 48, okay. So, preparing the Nostra Aetate encyclic of October or November 1965. This, the hand which the Protestants in their way, in a sense from bigger time, from more long time, and the Catholics in Nostra Aetate extended a hand to the Jews. It was a difficult process. Nostra Aetate, there was a lot of articles. The article concerning the Jews was the last to be discussed, and in a way the most spectacular one. This was a revolution in the life of all the Jews in the world and in their ability to fight and to face anti-Semitism. This is completely new. The fact, the day when the Catholic Church and the Protestant churches said to the world, the Jews, of course, are no longer our enemies, but they are no longer our fathers, as they said before. They are not even our fathers. They are our brothers in faith, not our fathers, because the father, alas, has a destiny which is to disappear and to leave his leg, his inheritance to the son. But the day, this very simple change of word, erasing father and putting instead brother, was one of the hugest, most huge revolution of our times. For me, as a Jew, this alliance with the Christian is one of the most precious gifts of which I inherited when I arrived at the age of being a man. This alliance has to be increased. These sorts of alliance, the example of this brotherhood between Jews and Christians has to be spread. The same sort of process, for example, should be developed in the direction of our others, brothers in faith, who are the Muslims. I'm happy to say that in front of my dear friend, Imam of Drancy Chalgouni, who is one of the Muslim worshippers in Europe who believes, like the Catholics of Nostra Aetate, that we are truly brothers, not in the sense of the Muslim brotherhood, but in the sense of a real deep brotherhood in spirit. The day when these alliances will be deepened and expanded will be again a huge force against anti-Semitism. You cannot win a war if you don't enlarge the front and if we don't expand the front. And the last point, when Jacob meets Esau, when he's ready to the confrontation with Esau, he is said to have acted in three ways: tefillah, prayers; milchama, in a way, war; and doron, which is gifts. I do believe that if we want really to defeat anti-Semitism, not to eradicate, but to defeat, to be stronger than the anti-Semite, we have to be faithful again to the lesson of Jacob. We have to say to the world that the world owes a lot to us, but that we have a lot to offer to the world also, and we have to do it. That's why I'm always so proud when I see a Jewish organization, European, French, Austrian, which is at the forefront of the fight against racism in general, which is at the forefront of the resistance against anti-democratic movement. I'm so proud and I'm so relieved because I know that to make these sorts of doron, to give back to the world what the world gave to us, is a crucial element of this war of long time which we are compelled to wage. And I'm so sorry when I see sometimes some Jewish organization who do the opposite, who sometimes it happens, and maybe in my third fatherland, which is America, when I see Jewish organizations who make compromises with, let's say, populism or with anti-democratic tendencies, I believe that in these events, we lose our soul, we lose the best which we have, we lose our strength, and we put ourselves in the position of losing some ground in this battle which we are waging and which we can win if we react really as proper Jews, faithful to their inner and intimate strength. This is my little program. Thank you.
Merci. I'm sorry, meine Herrschaft, nicht jetzt. We have one more small but important part of our program. The utmost expression of anti-Semitism, the most horrendous event in world's history, was the Shoah, the Nazi genocide of European Jewry. The fight against anti-Semitism is one of the most important legacies of the Shoah. In this spirit, Dr. Moshe Kantor will now bestow the award of the European Jewish Congress on Ruta Vanagaite, I hope I express your name correctly, for her book, Our People Journey with an Enemy. The EJC hereby recognizes the engagement of a writer who denounces Lithuania's role in the Shoah and points to the importance of fighting anti-Semitism and Holocaust denial. Moshe?
Dear friends, you know, I am so inspired by the speech of Bernard Lévy. With your permission, just give me 1 minute. I want a small reply to his outstanding, expression of the program. You know, I know two guys in the world who could, by speeches, by expressing their ideas, immediately convert, like magic effect, anti-Semites to non-anti-Semites. One is Rav Lau, and another one is Bernard Lévy. Bravo, well done. But, you know, just seriously, short reply. I agree with you that we should fight point after point, to all expressions and manifestations of anti-Semitism. But in order to be effective, we have to have at least 10 states of Israel in every continent, with the army of Israel. It's number one. Number two, or we have to have 1 million Bernard Lévys. In this case also we'll have success. I think that we have to have ideology. And I mentioned the idea of this ideology, secure tolerance. I will not repeat what I said before, because it should be like icebreaker. Because our opponents on Jewish street, on non-Jewish street, everywhere, are much stronger than we are, physically, materially, and etc., etc. So, we can't fight like in basketball, we call it pressing, everywhere, at every point. It could be very dangerous, we can lose the game. We should have the philosophy of icebreaker, to break the ice by concentrating all our efforts on one line. And this line should be ideology. I believe in this. Not less effective than ideology of communism and capitalism. It should be ideology of the 21st century. And the last thing, about your idea of creation and criteria of this commission, we should propose the beautiful idea of the monument, to victims. Let's ask FPO to finance this monument as well. This could be a good idea to check their good intentions. So I'm sorry for not programmed intervention, but you inspired me. You know, you are guilty. So, dear ladies and gentlemen, dear Ruta, dear Ariel, and a special greetings to Professor Dina Parat, standing near me, who is not sitting near me, sorry, sitting. and who is the internationally recognized expert on the history of the Holocaust in Lithuania. Historical truth is the vaccine of that boosts immunity against diseases, such as ultranationalism, extremism, and intolerance. Good knowledge of the nation's history can preserve new generations from committing fatal mistakes. The new generation cannot be held accountable for the deeds of the past, but it has a responsibility to restore historical truth. We all know a lot about the Holocaust, but the time is distancing us from the catastrophe, and the historical memory is fading. A large number of historians have spoken out on many occasions and written extensively on the topic of the Lithuanian activists' front's role in perpetrating the Holocaust in Lithuania. All this research and academic works are extremely valuable, but the truth is that they are not always accessible to the larger public. Ruta Vanagaite book, Our People Journeying with the Enemy, that speaks about a painful episode of her family's story, not only gave strength, but also light to the historical memory. Being a famous and best-selling author in Lithuania, Ruta could reach out all layers of Lithuanian society. She made us and the young generation look at the facts and admit the truth. In Lithuania, as in a lot of other countries, for many, it is not acceptable to admit the wrongdoings of previous generations. That is why this book received conflicting response. But Ruta stood against extreme public pressure with tremendous courage. Setting aside her personal interests, she risked her safety for the sake of historical truth and for the sake of the future of her own country. By bringing painful subjects to light, regardless of the personal cost, she acted as a true patriot of her country. The Lithuanian government also acted in a patriotic way when it decided not to bow to the pressure created by some individuals. The rule of the law prevailed. Her book, previously recalled from bookshelves, were returned to Ruta. The European Jewish Congress acknowledges the important contribution of Lithuania in creating a positive climate for Jewish life and Jewish tradition to flourish. We also commend Lithuania for pursuing friendly relations with the State of Israel and for the recent adoption of the working definition of antisemitism. This is undoubtedly a positive example for many European countries. I am reminded of the biblical saying, "But the path of the righteous is like the light of dawn that shines brighter and brighter until the full day." Through your courage, you have brought light to dispel much darkness. For us, there is no doubt Ruta is a righteous of the 21st century. And it is an honor to bestow upon you today this recognition of the European Jewish Congress, the Golden Vision Award. Come please here. There it is. Ruth is the first non-Jew receiving this award.
I know everybody is very tired, but I will take your attention just for a couple of minutes, because I have to say something not for myself, but to all these 200,000 victims, the biggest percentage in Lithuania, in all Europe, who have perished during the Holocaust, and most of them were killed by my countrymen. I'm not a hero, dear Dr. Kantor and dear guest. I'm simple, a middle-aged Lithuanian woman with a heart. A caring heart. I'm not ashamed to tell that almost 60 years of my life, I was quite ignorant about what happened during the Holocaust in my country. Like most Lithuanians, I knew that 200,000 Jews have been murdered by Nazis with the help of some local degenerates. 200,000 was just a number for me, as it was for most of my countrymen. The numbers don't make your heart beat. And besides, these Jews were not our people, they were Jews. The killers were not our people because they were killers. The history of my country is a blameless story of interchanging episodes of the suffering and heroism of our people. And then one winter day, just by pure accident, I discovered that 2 members of my family had taken part in the Holocaust. I know that my grandfather and my aunt's husband personally didn't shoot anybody, but they were part of bureaucratic machine of killing. They compiled lists of those to be killed or organized the shootings, and later they were rewarded for their assistance. That day, my eyes opened widely. That day, I started my lonely trip into the black hole of Shoah in Lithuania, into the archives and into the books. And that day, I thought, if not me, who? If not now, when? I had to find the truth, and I found it. The truth was shocking. Then, after 6 months, after reading perpetrators' interrogations, protocols and documents in Lithuanian archives, I had to start another long trip, this one into the depths of Lithuanian forests, where 227 mass graves are hidden from people's eyes. I was not alone. For this mission, I had an important companion and a soulmate, Dr. Ephraim Zurov of Simon Wiesenthal Center in Jerusalem. At every mass murder site, we visited in Lithuania and Belarus, where Lithuanians also killing Belarusian Jews. I heard him saying Kaddish. I saw him crying for his people. The book came out. The title was very simple, Our People. This book that I thought nobody would ever read suddenly became a real wake-up call for my country, a wake-up call from lethargy and self-deception of 27 years. This book finally opened the eyes of many Lithuanians and made them see the faces of the victims as well as faces of the murderers. The book made them finally realize that the perished Jews were not just statistics. They were people, our people. And the perpetrators, unfortunately, were our people as well. When this book came out, many of my countrymen started seeing the history of our homeland in a different light, more accurate, more human. For 2 years, Our People was the bestseller, 19,000 copies, long lines in the libraries to get it, angry voices of Lithuanian political elite and Lithuanian patriots. Beautiful letters from the witnesses of the murders who are now 80 or 85 years old. Nobody in 75 years has ever visited them and asked them what they saw next to their homes in 1941. There were letters telling more stories about the Shoah, letters from women who read the book and cried. They had the hearts they care. And as Professor Lévy said, people have very little space in their hearts. My book, I believe, expands the space to care and feel sorrow for other people, not only for Lithuanians. It does not matter that a couple of months ago, in October, the book was suddenly removed from all the bookstores in Lithuania, together with all my other books, 27,000 copies altogether. After a question, one of the anti-Soviet resistant leaders was worthy being honored by our parliament. It does not matter that I'm labeled very often as an enemy of my country or agent of a foreign power. I believe that our people will come back one way or another. I have a garage where I store all my 27,000 books. 2 years ago, the process of healing and reconciliation in my country has finally begun, and nobody can stop it. Nobody can stop the river of truth once it starts flowing. In conclusion, I have a confession to make. After I wrote the book, 227 mass Holocaust graves scattered in the beautiful forests of my country have become more important to me than graves of my grandparents and parents. When I think of my family, I know they lived a long life and died peacefully when their time expired. The individual graves are beautifully decorated. When I think of the mass graves of 200,000 Holocaust victims, I don't see the numbers. I see what I read in one of the many shockingly candid testimonies of the killer. I see a Jewish father lying in the pit, face down, on the top of 3 layers of other victims who were shot before him. He is holding his son. The killer said he was trying to be merciful, so he shot the father first, so the father would not see his child's death. I think of the entry wound in the father's skull that is 0.3 centimeters wide, and the exit wound that is 3 centimeters wide, 10 times bigger, since the killer was given explosive bullet. The skull of the boy is intact. The man said many children in the pits were buried alive. I know that 77 years later, the father is still holding his child. He will hold him forever. I can promise what I promised Ephraim Zurov at the end of our mission. I will not abandon them as long as I live. Thank you for the word. It gives me a lot of strength. Thank you.
Tired and hungry, me too, but we will sing a last song for you. Kleines gemütliches Vorstadtlokal, das habe ich dann neulich entdeckt. Fauteuils haben kein Zimt und Klavier kein Pedal und Kracherl, so heißt dort der Sekt. Im Grand Hotel ist es wunderbar, doch dort ist es 1000-mal schöner. Einem kleinen Café in Hernals spült's Grammophon mit leisem Ton an Englisch Walz. Dort genügen 2 Mocker allein, um ein paar Stunden so glücklich zu sein. In einem kleinen Café in Herneuss klopft manches Herz hinauf bis zum Haus und geben 2 Verliebte sich dort Rendezvous. Drückt der Herr Ober ganz diskret ein Auge zu. Die Tassen, die sind dort aus dickem Porzellan, zerbrechlich, so leicht sind sie nicht. Die Herzen dagegen sind sehr filigran und oft kommt es vor, dass eins bricht. An Zeitungen haben's keine Spesen, dort wird in den Augen gelesen. In einem kleinen Café in Herneuss spielt's Grammophon mit leisem Ton an Englisch Walz. Dort genügen 2 Mocker allein, um ein paar Stunden so glücklich zu sein. In einem kleinen Café in Herneuss klopfte manches Herz hinauf bis zum Haus und geben 2 Verliebte sich dort Rendezvous. Drückt der Herr Ober alle beiden Augen zu.
Um das ein bisschen aufzuheitern, ihre Großeltern kamen aus der Sowjetunion und sie singt Hermann Kohn, vulgo Leopoldi, ein kleines Café in Hernals. Auch das ist Wiener Judentum. Vielen Dank, Ethel Merhardt und Bella Koreni. And I would like to really thank you all for contributing to the success of tonight's event. Bernard-Henri Lévy, en 47 ans, in 47 years of being a professional Jew and working in Jewish organization, it's always a pleasure to listen to you. You give us strength and you give us pleasure and you are loading our batteries. Thank you really a lot for what you're doing. It's great. Merci. I would like to thank Pater Hoffmann and the Holiness the Pope Francis for his kind words. President Alexander van der Bellen's message, Rector Engel who left. I would like to thank Daniel Löcker and all his team for preparing this great evening. Sorry that we are late and we extended it. Moshe Kantor, I mentioned a couple of times before, Talia Lador, the ambassador, and of course those who prepared this conference, Professors Davidowitz, Lange, Porat and Schiffmann and their staff. We are overwhelmed by the large public interest of this opening and appreciate that you all came to the Rathaus today. We wish you all a wonderful evening here in Vienna and a successful conference. I apologize that due to City Hall regulations we could not invite everybody to the major reception. But since we are so late, I guess Mr. Löcker is not going to kill me. I don't think that so many are here left anymore. But anyway, the reception for the guests from abroad is now going to take place in the Wappensaal. So those of you who have an invitation, please go there. And I will be standing there to see if some others can come in or not. But the fire rules are very strict here, so they won't let in more than 250 people. Thank you very much for coming, and good evening.